Hello, I'm Li Hao. So for the past few days, I've been cleaning up Svelte GitHub issues. I'm not sure I clean up all of them, but I've gone through a few of them, make some changes, add some PRs and things like that. And while I was doing it, I was thinking that maybe some of you may be interested in this kind of videos, like how do I actually go through Svelte issues and how do I fix them. So, but at the same time, you wouldn't want me to see me combing through them because it's very boring. Basically, I'm like doing it intermittently. I like look through some issues and then maybe wander off watching some YouTube videos and then come back again, or maybe go for a toilet break, snack break, and things like that. But I decided to record it on my screen, just the screen, and I try to trim some of the pieces together and do some voiceover across them. So here are they. I've made a few videos, so this is the one that you're watching now is one of them. And yeah, so I see how many of them actually made it through. And if you like this kind of videos, you know what to do. Smash the like button, so that YouTube algorithm knows that this is a good video and they'll suggest to more people to watch. And good for me as well, so that I know that you are really interested to this kind of video. Then I'll try my best to do more of this kind of videos, right? So that's it. Enjoy the video. So let's take a look at this issue over here. It says that meta tag gets svelte class name when root selector is defined. Okay, so blah, 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 blah. Okay, so here, if you have a root, it says that the elements like meta will get a svelte generated class names. Okay, so let's click on the REPL and take a look at what it's trying to say over here. So if you take a look at here, if you inspect element, it says that see the head. Oh wait, the paragraph itself also have the svelte class name. It's not just the meta tag, right? So so if we are selecting this root element only, then we shouldn't attach this svelte hash svelte hash class names to the elements, because this root actually is selecting the roots of the documents, which is the in this case the HTML element itself, this element itself, right? So yeah, it's selecting this element itself. So we don't have to encapsulate any we don't have to attach any svelte class names in this scenario, right? Yeah, because when we attach this class name is only when we are trying to scoping the selectors. So I'm guessing that the logic is here is like this, where it looks at this root selector and it thinks that it applies to all the elements over here, so it attach the class names all over the elements, like for meta and the p tag. So that's why you see this svelte hash class names attached to these elements, right? But if you look at CSS helper over here, the root itself does not have that svelte hash name. So maybe when it's generating a CSS, when you're trying to attach this, so usually what we'll do is we'll add this svelte class name to this element, right? So you will probably add it like this, but maybe there's a special logic over here where if it's a root, then it will not apply that class to that element. Yeah, maybe something like that. So we shall see how we can fix this. Okay, so let's go open our VS Code and see what we should change. Right, so first of all, I think we need to add a test case to verify this first. So okay, I see a host. I'm just gonna simply copy a test case, right? And I'm gonna, whoops, what's this? Okay, so we're gonna come over here and make our changes. So maybe first is we can add a roots element over here, color red, and then have some elements like this, hello, okay. And what we expect is we're gonna see roots and color red. Okay, probably no spaces in between. As well as we want to verify the HTML, expected.html. So how do I know that I can add HTML over here? Actually, you can go and read the test case. So this is the test.css.index.ts. So this is where it says how the test should be run. And if you come over here and search for expected.css, you realize that there's also trying to read the expected HTML. So it's actually trying to read the HTML. Here is actually a try catch. So if the file is not it's not present, then the HTML actually null. So if you have expected HTML, it actually will try to, if it's not null, then try to read it and compare to the HTML, inner HTML of the main element. So main element is where you attach your component into. So which means that in expected HTML we can write this and expect hopefully our HTML element that looks like this, right? So let's try to run a test. First thing is I'm gonna run a yarn dev, start our dev server. This will constantly watching our code changes and build our compiler for us. So once that's done, I'm gonna come over here and run yarn quick test and run a test. So quick test. So there's two commands to run a test. One is yarn test and one yarn quick test. Okay. So I'm gonna change the. So you see that it runs all the tests, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change to solo. So it will just run this particular test. Okay. So I'm gonna run a test again. So back to what I say, yarn test and yarn quick test. The differences between them is that the first one, yarn test actually runs the linting as well as tab checking before running a test. Yarn quick test will just run the test. Let's see, input those fields. Where does this host even comes from? Oh, okay. So this should be like this. Okay, let's run the test again. Okay, so now you see that the test failed because it attached the class name, svelte hash class name to the element, but our expected is the green one, which is no class name, right? So this is something we're gonna fix. So the first file I'm gonna look at is the selector.ts file, right? So this selector is a selector class that handles all the CSS selector logic within Svelte. So one keyword I'm going to look for is called encapsulate. So encapsulate is this. So the logic of encapsulation means that it tries to is what we call the CSS, the scoped CSS is where the logic works for figuring out what elements need to attach for the svelte hash class names, as well as determining like what are the CSS selectors applied to it. Right, so the logic over here, if you look at here, it says like to encapsulate, which is to give us the elements that needs to be encapsulated, and there's the apply selector. Right, so when you apply a selector, it means that based on this selector that we have right now, whether this selector can be applied to the element. So we're gonna pass in the node, which is an element, right, and give it, and then when it returns us the list of array that can be encapsulated. We're going to loop through that and say that these are the elements that needs to have a CSS class. So you add these nodes to the nodes with CSS class. So if you search for this, you see that in this function reify, we will add the CSS class for each of these node elements, right? And also it says that this block should be encapsulated. Right, the block would be the current selector. Yeah. So the selector itself can be a list, can be arrays of blocks, right? Because a selector can be, say you write A, B, then there C, so there will be like array of selectors. So this will actually tells us like what which of it is selecting the element and which of it needs to be encapsulated, right? So when it says encapsulate, which means that later on we will actually go in and add the svelte hash class name to the selector as well. So add something like this, right? And then lastly, we'll mark that this selector is being used. So I believe this will be the one that will say whether your element selector is being used or not, right? So to recap, there's actually two things happening right here over now in this function. So first is that it will okay, so it will do one thing and there's two things will happens in result of it, right? So what it's trying to do is try to apply the selector to the element, right? So two things will happen. First is that the element that is being applied will have the svelte-xxx svelte hash class name, right? Attach class name to element. And then what happens to a selector is that selector will be considered as used, as well as the selector itself will have the add the svelte to the selector as well, right? You will say it's being used as well as adding the svelte hash to the selector itself, right? So now we're gonna look at let's take a look at the apply selector, right? So if you come over here, apply selector, you see a lot of things happening over here. But one thing that I want you to pay attention is this block my apply to node. So come over here, it's actually a logic where it says that what kind of selectors are you and are you able to apply to the node, right? So block applies to node whether it's possible, not possible, and unknown, right? So cases where it's unknown, then it's really unknown. It's a new CSS selectors that we haven't handled right now yet, right? So I think we can say that it's not possible to apply because roots selects the roots element, which is the document itself, right? In most cases, then it shouldn't be applied. So I'm gonna come over here and say pseudo selectors, if it's name or it is root. If it's the name is host or the name is root, then it's not possible, right? Because if it's not this case, then if any pseudo selectors, so elements it's actually ignored. We just don't care, because I mean, you can't really say whether a pseudo selector or functions something like a not or a is and things like that, whether it can be applied to an element, right? I think it's just hard. Maybe like you have a hover state and things like that. So we just ignore them, and in the end of the function we say it's possible. So anything else is possible. So we have hosts and roots over here. Let's try and run this yarn quick test. Hopefully it works. Oh no, unused CSS selectors. Okay, that makes sense. So we say that, okay, so apply selector previously is saying that everything is possible, then it will attach the svelte hash class names to the element, right, which is not what we want, as well as you will mark the element as being a selector is being used and attach this svelte hash to the selector. Right now we say it's not possible, then we don't attach, which is good, but then we are not marking the selector as used, which is not what we want. So let's figure out how to do both. So here in selector, let's see, selector, apply. Okay, apply selector. We need to figure a way to set this use to be true. Oh yeah, so here if you look up over here, it says this use is equals to some logic. If there's no selector at all, then it's considered as being used, as well as host only. So host only meaning if we only have one selector and it's a host selector, I think we can add something like a root only. So if it's roots only, if a root, then we can say it's being used as well, right? So now we need to figure out how to add the root. So jump into where we have the host. Let's just copy another property called root. Okay, so here default is false. Okay, I guess then default for root will be false as well. Okay, so here is where we set the value this.host. So I guess we can copy this and say this.root equals selector. If it's a class selector and name is root. Okay, let's try that. Yan, quick test. Oh, yay, we passed the test. Okay, so we passed the test, and I think that's it, right? Let's try. Actually, I think of another case, right? So roots sometimes it's rare, but it's possible that you add a class name to it. I'm not sure, like. So I'm gonna say call it a foo. Right? It's possible that you have a class name foo applied to the root element, right? Maybe that's when you would say that a different color, right? Maybe this is your dark mode kind of thing, where if you have a class applied to roots, then you will have a different color. I'm not sure whether people will write roots like this. Right? Roots with a class called foo. Let's make sure that all three of them does not. Right now, if you look, if I hover over here, it says unused CSS selector, but it's actually used, right? Because you're never able to apply roots to any of these elements over here. So I'm gonna run quick test. Gonna see what we end up having. So it's complaining an unused selector, but it should be used. So I believe we probably would have to come over here and look at the roots, right? So here it says that if the selector, if it does not have any selector, the first selector, then the host will be yeah. So the host property itself only whether a selector is a host selector depends on the first selector itself. But whether a selector is a root actually can be the root selector itself can be the first, second, or second or third or else, right? Because over here, roots itself can exist in front or at the back, right? In front of foo or at the back of foo, right? So we're gonna change this to say if we are still not root, then we will check again whether is it a root, right? So this is actually similar to say this.roots equals to this.root or new condition, right? So once it's true, it's always true, but if it's false, we'll keep checking whether the new selector added is a pseudo class selector with a root. Right, so that's it. That's the new line we're gonna adding. Let's try to run our test again. And okay, so there's no more warning, but of course we still have to fix our CSS because I mean we just need to add this to it, right? So that's right, we don't add any svelte hash to it. That's correct. So let's update our test case. And that's it. The test passed. So I believe that's it that we are testing. So I'm gonna remove the solo so that you don't only run this test in the CI. Of course, there's also a check whether if there's any solo test, it will actually throw an error. It will also exit with an error in the CI that says that you shouldn't have any solo test in the CI. Right. So that's it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a branch. Class name, issue name 4767. Actually, we're gonna go to this branch 4767. Okay, we're gonna add all the file changes that we have. We're gonna run linting. I'm just gonna run just for one file because this is the only file that we change. I think as well as this. So usually I don't run the linting on the whole project locally because it just takes time to run. If everything is good, then we can also check TypeScript, whether it's the type checking, whether we break any types. And give me a second. Okay, everything is passed. Then we're gonna add all the files and we're gonna commit. So fix roots selector adding svelte hash class name to elements. Okay, that's it. So we're gonna push this and we're gonna create a merge request, pull request out of this. I'm gonna say it's gonna fix this issue, and we are not creating a new feature. Okay, we're gonna prefix our with a fix, and then clearly illustrate what is fixed. Fix all the test case, run tests and lint. Okay, let's create a pull request, and that's it. That's it for this issue. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions you would like to check, ask me. You can always comment down in the description box below. And before we end this video, I'm gonna just plug in something, which is buy me a coffee. So if you head over to buymeacoffee.com/lihaotan, this is my page for buy me a coffee, which means that if you like my content, if you want to support me in terms of in financially, you can always buy me a coffee. You can be my coffee buddy by buy me a coffee every month by joining as my membership, or you can support me by buy me a one-time coffee. No support is too little to me because any support that you're showing me gives me a greater confidence in continuing produce these contents, because I know you out there loves my content and you like to support me. So that's all for this video, and see you in the next video. So see ya, bye bye.